this
I
gentleman?
hope it's soon because I just called the bus to you.
Well,
But they're going to be a half hour from now.
Okay,
They
well,
won't be
he's
that
here
soon.
right now. He's going to get started. He's with the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that would be interesting because I really don't know much about, them. Well, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Sam.
Pleasure to meet everybody.
This is fun, Gene. I really thank God. I'm so glad.
I'm glad you're here too.
I was very careful.
Yeah, front so it won't fold.
Just use your outside voice.
All right, I'll try.
And I'll go like this if you're not loud enough to.
Okay. I'm going to start by introducing and saying hello in our language the way we would if we were formally greeting everybody. It'd be Bonjour, Chamukmanik Ninikwe Wok, Chamukmanik, Migizi Ina Bandama Ki and Dishnikos, Gachin Zibi Dawa Anishnave and Dojaba, Nimkid Indodam, Namanitagong Endat,
Oh, my.
Nus Dishnikos Abayanka, Gashi Dishnikos June, Minawa Gachingimakwe. That's a basic introduction where you say hello, bonjour, it's a formal hello. Then you tell people your name. My name is, in our language, it translates roughly to eagle sees the world in the dream, or sees the world as a dream.
Right. Eagle.
And then I told you that I was from the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, that I lived in Namanitagong, is what we called this area, the land under the trees, that my clan, Dodom, was Thunder, and that's important because if you're Thunder clan, then we're cousins. Not way down the list cousins, like first cousins. Like if I come to your village and you're a Thunder clan member, you're supposed to take me in and treat me like a family member, same as if you showed up here and we're Thunder clan, we'd have to do the same thing in this clan. Then I told you my father's name, which was Clouds Come Together, Apeankot, and my mother's name, which was June, because her heritage was mostly Gaelic, although there was some from a Canadian tribe that we couldn't fully verify. So she was also known, because she was only about 5 foot tall, as Gachingimakwe, little bossy woman.
Little bossy.
She didn't say bossy, she always said it was little boss woman.
The Gaelic is what caught my ears, though. It's all interesting, but the Gaelic.
Yeah, they're Brune and O'Shea, Brune and Forshey.
Okay. My
One
mother was born
Brune
in
from
Ireland.
Scotland, O'Shea from Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
what I
our
was
background.
wondering about. Yeah.
Somehow we got along with those folks. Might be the like of potatoes, I don't know. But Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, if you go back and you start looking in history and you don't read Our People, Our Journey, which is our own history, we wrote it, had it written, you won't find their name anywhere necessarily. Because we're part of what was called the Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians. We were the 9 villages that were mostly in the north. Here, Indian Village or Indian Town in Mason County, near Notipacago, the place of skulls. On the Pentwater River, the White River, and northern Muskegon River near Newaygo. Also, we did have villages on the Grand River that were there. My great-great-grandfather, Pakatush, was the head man of one of the villages on the Grand River. Out about 3/4 of the way from Grand Rapids to Grand Haven,
Okay.
where they now call it Battle Point, right near Indian Bayou, which I don't think it was called Indian Bayou when they were there. It's amazing that a lot of folks in this county don't know any of the history of the Net tribe in this county.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, I'm a transplant myself, but I'm interested in what you're speaking about.
And the reason for that is, of course, our history is pretty colorful for our relationship with the federal government.
Okay.
In the federal government relationship, we signed the Treaty of 1836. Look, oh, you're gonna get all bubbly.
Sorry. Sorry. I had to make the last one, guys. Sorry.
I thought it was
Thanks, everybody,
nice,
for
but
playing.
I was just hoping nobody got, bubble blinded or something.
I like this stuff.
And we made that treaty, which ceded most of Michigan, what is now Michigan, to the federal government. In fact, the land they ceded was handed to the state of Michigan before it was a state, and that allowed them to have enough territory to become a state in 1837. The reservation was to be established on the Pierre Marquette River. Now, I usually, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have tried to find a way to bring some pictures so you could look at stuff and understand what I'm saying. The problem with that is, of course, would you like a chair? I can stand up. I can move around now too. It's harder to hit without fruit and stuff. But we were signing the treaty, and we set up that there would be certain reservations in areas. Now, the map they used wasn't very good, although it was supposed to be the best map of Michigan at the time. I looked it up and found an interesting little tidbit fact. It said it was drawn by a Frenchman named Dupere, D-U-P-E-R-E, and he was one of the best cartographers of his day. Yeah, there was also a footnote that said he'd never left his own city block in Paris. So he was drawing maps from everybody else's
So
notes.
he was from Paris.
Yeah. He was,
And he was living,
no, he was living in Paris because he never left his,
he never left Paris. Okay.
but he took all the notes from people and drew maps.
Yeah.
And they all agreed that the maps were so fine because the map of Michigan he's got, the west coast runs kind of at a 45 up to the little triangle at the top, which, as we know, isn't the case. It was a little tough because it was the map they were using, because they said they would use the Pierre Marquette River, which nobody living on this shore knew about, because we didn't have a Pierre Marquette River. Namanitagong ZB, land under the trees river. South of us, Notapatago ZB, or Nindabaketong ZB, place of skulls and skeletons, river.
What a strange name.
Well, that's because the area, about a 4-mile stretch of it, had bodies that would wash out of the burials in the bank, and they would just set the remains up on the bank for somebody to come along and rebury them.
I see. Oh.
So they looked at it and they saw it was all a place where all these skeletons were, so they called it the place of bones.
Yeah.
Skulls are the place of bones.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was no Pierre Marquette River, so when Schoolcraft decided to set the reservation up, he just came up and stopped here and said, I don't see any village right away. I guess this is a good spot to stop. But the village was way upstream. There were 2 of them up there. But he set the Indian Center up on Manistee Lake. The village, or the reservation for Grand Traverse, also a signatory band, is easy to explain how bad the map was because it's on the north shore of Grand Traverse Bay, because they had it running this way. I like to do that because after I show the map, I usually show the modern thing. And I go, if we go north till we hit the shore, we're in the upper peninsula. And the bay gets really big in the middle. But that's what they had set there, so they actually put it over near Acme. Because they looked at it and they said, well, if we stood it up,
Yeah.
that's where it is.
Interesting.
They did a few of those, and when we signed the treaty, when the tribe signed it, the reservations were forever. But imagine this. The President of the United States and Congress weren't getting along. So the Senate, who has to confirm the treaty, changed it. They actually limited all the reservations and things to 5 years, unless people were allowed to live there longer. Well, as we got reaffirmed, we pointed out that nobody's ever come and said, you guys got to go. So we've been living here the whole time. In fact, our Reaffirmation Act says we've been here predating the United States, predating any other settlers, which is true, but it's not well understood. In order to try and correct that issue and get a strong land base, we entered into the Treaty of Detroit in 1855. One of the clauses the tribes put in the Treaty of Detroit was one that said, we are dissolving the Ottawa Chippewa tribe of Michigan, which was really good because there is no Ottawa Chippewa tribe of Michigan. and never was.
Oh, it's-
We actually call ourselves Anishinaabe.
Say again.
Anishinaabe. Good people or first people lower. Chippewas are Anishinaabe. Potawatomi are Anishinaabe. In fact, that's what they say when they tell you who they are. Then they'll throw in, like I did, Dawa or Ottawa for traders. And that came about because when we first made contact with Europeans, they wanted to know who we were because we didn't seem like the other tribes. So we agreed to a council where we all, in a council, you all get in a big circle like we are kind of here, and everybody takes their turn talking. And what they did was they brought somebody up and asked if they could ask questions about what was going on. And so we said, sure, as long as you do it over there and not interfere with what's going on over here. So that's what they did. Their translator, I suspect, was Iroquois, who doesn't necessarily speak our language, but we had dealt with them, fought with them, other things. So they probably had some people who were familiar with it in any way. And what happened was they had the council going. And when you go to council, everybody used to put on their council-looking clothes because, you don't want to be sitting there kind of grungy. But people came in who, young men mostly, came in and they put firewood on all the fires. And their hair was a little different than the folks in council who, an Ottawa male, it was said, took more time to fix his hair than a French courtesan. Now, when I read that a long time ago, when I was real young, I didn't know what a French courtesan was. So I looked it up, going through the book, and said, courtesan, ladies in waiting, quote unquote, in French court for the nobility. And the only picture they had was a woman who had her hair stacked up around a bird cage with a bird in it. And I thought, man, them guys in the past must have just, nope, this one's out of place, nope, that one. Because to take longer than those people to fix your hair, it took a while. But they were putting wood on the fires. And because they looked different, the person asked, well, who are they? Who in our language, I believe, is Wegnesh. The translator turned and went, Wenesh. Wenesh P. What are they doing? And was told, Bodwayatomi, Potawatomi, they're tending the fire. Those are the guys who took care of the village. So the person wrote down Potawatomi. Well, then a bunch of individuals loaded a huge canoe, and they're all standing around, and they all look different again. Because the Anishinaabe learned if we're going to trade with the Iroquois, we'll do our hair like the Iroquois. We'll wear kind of their style of clothes. If we're going across the lake to the Ho-Chunk and the folks over there, we're going to look a little more like the Sauk, the Fox, and the Ho-Chunk. Because if you show up looking like their enemy, you don't get to do a lot of trading. So it's the same question. He wanted to know who they were, and he actually asked, what are they doing? And he was told, Dawanini, the trading men, they're going to trade. So he wrote down Dawa, or Ottawa, or Ottawa, or Ottawa. There's only like 7, 8 spellings. In the end, people came in, talked to other folks, and then left. Well, the same question happened. And what he was told was a Chippewa, which is keepers and tellers of the story. They went from place to place and told people what was happening in other villages, which I always like to remind people means that they were the original CNN. They were the Chippewa News Network. But once they get, well, anyway, that's what we understood happened. There could have also been a Chippewa, which means puckering in the heat.
It means what?
In which case, I don't want to know what they were doing. It's just, the other part makes more sense. But go 500 years from that date, and even the Anishinaabe determine whether you're Ottawa, Chippewa, or Potawatomi. you can't necessarily, you can be some of each, you can be part of whatever, but we never just say we're Anishinaabeg, especially if it's to the federal government, because they don't know what that means. They're like, yeah, but which one? So that's why we're Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi. Back to the Ottawa Chippewa tribe being dissolved. It was dissolved because, as I just pointed out, it never really existed. They used it so they could make treaties and make deals. Because the Chippewas might want to make a deal with the Ottawa didn't, which happened in 36. The Ottawa may want to refresh a deal like 55, and the Chippewas may not. So both of them agreed, let's get rid of that whole fake tribe thing. And the end result was, the Ottawas seemed to disappear. Suddenly, if you look in old history books or old textbooks about America, the Ottawa were all in Canada, never in America. Can't be helped, don't know why. The Ottawa disappeared, the Chippewa did not. The Chippewa tribe, Sault Ste. Marie and Bay Mills, stayed right where they were. So from that point forward, at varying times, Little River Band and its members under various names told the federal government, hey, we're still here. Can you recognize us? Can you serve us? Can you do what you're supposed to do? And in 1935, following the Reorganization Act, the Indian Reorganization Act, we asked them, the Secretary of the Interior sent somebody out to check, and they said, yep, you guys are Indians. Where's your reservation? And we said, you guys are supposed to keep the reservation. And they said, oh, you don't have a reservation? I'm sorry, we can't do anything for you. A little later, 1948, same question, same answer. 1972, we thought we'd ask Congress to tell them that maybe we should be looked at. And instead of recognizing the tribe, they recognized different people in it. Yes, you're a Native American, here's your ID card. You can use it to get services in other tribes. Oh, by the way, it says that you're a Native American off reservation, which in the state of Minnesota, New Mexico, and California meant you were a renegade, subject to be arrested. So, you didn't really use that too far away, or too often. We kept at them though, and finally in 1992, we joined the Little Traverse Bay bands and going into Congress and saying, here's all the information, look it over. We'd like you to reaffirm that we've never left and we've never ended our relationship with the government, which they did. Public Law 103, 103rd Congress, 324th Act they passed, says that the Little Traverse Bay bands and the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians have always been in a government-to-government relationship that the federal government dropped. But the tribes had always stayed. Now, part of what happened was tribal children were scooped up and hauled off to resident schools, were scooped up and hauled off to be boarded out to non-tribal families. I have cousins who actually had that happen to them. Technically, we kind of hid out in the old Indian village area down by Brothers. We didn't get into town too often, except maybe the mail stuff. And so a lot of people didn't even know they were here as they went along. They helped with the lumbering, they did trapping. We did trapping so much that, and I find this amazing, but it's true. They used to trap, sort all the fur out, pick the best fur they had, and as a group, they'd bundle it up according to the instructions sent by the Sears Roebuck Company, send it to Sears Roebuck with a list of products they wanted to buy, send it to Chicago, and Sears would ship back the products, and sometimes the whole list would come back, sometimes only part of the list, and every once in a while, the whole list and some money. I said, that would be today like calling up Amazon and saying, yeah, I'd like to order something. I got 3 beaver, 2 deer skins, 4 foxes, and 21 muskrat. What Here's what I want to order. And they say, well, when we get it, we'll look and ship stuff back. I don't think that's going to happen. Because we were doing that all the way up to about 1930. And it just amazes me that bundle it up, send it south, wait, get stuff back, good for us. The other aspect that goes with it, I talked to some tribal elders about the Great Depression. I said, what'd you guys do during the Depression? They said, we lived in houses that didn't have running water or electricity. We got our water from the spring you used to bring water up yourself from. We traded fur, we traded smoked fish, sometimes baskets and other good things like that. We didn't even know there was a depression until somebody brought a newspaper down and read it to us, which I find to be true. They didn't realize that the whole economy had been suppressed because they were just living the way they had lived the whole time. Indian Village we had an archaeological group go out there. They had trouble. They were talking when I was out there, and they said, we can't find any of the foundations for the houses. And I said, houses? Foundations? What are you talking about? The guy said, what do you mean? That's why they were on skids. They'd get two big logs out, make like a skid, and then build their little house on it. He said, why would they do that? I said, that way if you had a problem with your neighbor, they get together the horses they were using for the logging and pulping business and pull your house down the street and pull it into a different spot. Move somebody else over into your spot, and the neighborhood kept moving around like that. I said, it had 5 or 6 different configurations, but it was all the same houses, all the same families. And she said, well, we're tired of living in this spot. Let's move over across the street. Go get the horses. So there weren't any foundations. But I did learn about archaeology and that they were so concerned because they wanted to find all the garbage pits. Because with the garbage, they could tell what life was like. And I said, how come you never ask people who talk to the folks who are closest to that period? How come you don't go up and ask someone who's talked to their grandfather who lived in 1910 what life was like then? Because he would tell them what it was like from his grandfather and so forth backwards. That's how I learned the oral history of the tribe, is listening to it over and over and repeating the portion they were telling me word for word, because you can't change that portion. You only change the portion where you pick up the story. And I picked it up in about 68. So from 68 forward, our history goes from just a straight factual thing to little anecdotes and throwing in parts to let people know that we're paying strong attention. It's amazing that most people don't realize all the things Native Americans have put up with. In 1890, practice of Native American religion by 2 or more persons was against federal law. That meant any of the religious practices. If 2 or more people did them, they were subject to being arrested and hauled to federal penitentiaries or held by the county sheriff till the feds told them let them go. That didn't change till 1978. So needless to say, a lot of our practices and ceremonies were hidden, changed. One of them is called a ghost supper or an ancestor feast. We used to do it on All Saints Day, because that way if the priest showed up, you could say, no, it's an All Saints dinner. It has nothing to do with our own religion. It's All Saints Day. And about one of the major lodges moved all of its ceremonies to night because it knew the Wabano Yamak, the dawn people, knew that the priests and such wouldn't come out on the reservation at night because they were afraid, evidently. So they practiced the same stuff as everybody else did in the daytime, only they did it at night so they didn't have to hide it so much. But they don't understand that. They don't understand when I was talking about kids being taken out of the home. I had cousins taken out of my uncle's home because they came to do a check on the house. And they didn't find any bread from the store or milk. So they said, this house isn't fit to raise children in because it doesn't have necessities for children. And boof, off they went. They've since rediscovered who they are and come back. But here's the part that I understand from it. We didn't have a lot of bread from the store because we didn't get into town except maybe once every month. And then it was if we absolutely had to. But we baked biscuits and we baked bread and we made fry bread every day. So we didn't have that, and we didn't have a lot of milk products because Native Americans are lactose intolerant. We didn't have milk.
So they didn't even have any knowledge about this.
Oh, they didn't care.
Yeah,
That's the thing is they didn't care what's going on with the person or what the story is about it. It was a good way to take the person out of the home so they can't learn the language, they can't see any of the traditions, so that they lose all that.
Yeah.
That's also why they made handcuffs for 5-year-olds, about yay big around, to go on their wrists and ankles, so they could haul them off to the boarding schools. The one up by Petoskey, the one down by Mount Pleasant, ones in other parts. And when they got to the boarding school, they got their hair cut, they got their clothes taken away if they had regular traditional clothing on. They were told they didn't have that name, they couldn't use the language anymore. And they just lost who they were. And that's one of the reasons we have so much trouble with the language today is a lot of people didn't use it because they were afraid if I use it and we're in Myers, somebody will know that we're native and they'll know we got children, and that means they'll come and get the kids. Or you could also, by the way, adopt for $5 in the United States of America. You could adopt a native child for $5 just through a clearinghouse. So it's tough. It's not easy surviving that route, but they did. Survived all the diseases we didn't have that showed up. Gave the world corn, potatoes, tomatoes, a lot of berries, several other plants that they eat. South America gave them chocolate. So I'm pretty sure that, the world's gotten better for having run into us or met us.
It wasn't for those poor souls,
There are no potatoes that grew anywhere else. Tomatoes were here, and when they gave them to Columbus, he thought they were a different plant that's in Europe. So he cut their hands off because he thought they were trying to poison him.
I can't believe I'm hearing this.
Corn was growing here, but it doesn't grow. It never grew wild. It was something they crossbred enough to get. Wild rice isn't really a rice; it's more of a grain than rice is, and it's actually a little healthier, but it takes longer to cook. The corn we had, had a specific process to cook it and prepare it. You either ground it up in the meal and use it that way, or you put it in water till it cracked open, and then you cooked it in that water, and it was actually very nutritious. Of course, they got to Europe with it and they forgot how to cook it, so they fed it to their animals, found out they could grow it and feed it to their animals and have more room for the stuff they knew how to cook. It's an interesting history in that even today we feel sometimes like we're invisible. More Native Americans as a percentage of their own population than any other ethnic group in this country have served in the military. When asked why, they say because it's the person's responsibility to defend the people in their land. So they all join the military. Native Americans tend to not be in any of the discussions. What discussions do you hear about? Well, they talk about Hispanics and blacks and whites. Occasionally they throw in Asians. We must be that group that is thrown in when they finally say brown people. Because we are kind of down the list. History records, the Nazis' Holocaust. And it's true the Nazis killed 6 million Jews or so. Of course, on this continent, when Columbus arrived, there were probably 150 to 200 million people. When the Pilgrims arrived, there might have been 10 million. When they finally stopped the Indian wars and making treaties, there were 2 million. And that's where we are expanding from, or hanging on from, is 2 million. We're also the only ethnicity that in the past had to prove what degree of ethnicity you were. If say you're black and you have somebody who is in your past, in your family treated black, you're black.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have to leave.
That's all right. If you're any other ethnicity, you just say, that's what I am. If you're going to prove you're Native American, you have to show that you reach a specific level of Native American blood, or you don't count most of it for the federal government, or it didn't. Now, once tribes got to be recognized or reaffirmed and realized, wait, we can define who's in our tribe and who isn't, that started changing. But until that point, you have to be 1/4 Native American to be Native American. Otherwise, you're not. I think that's one of the hardships that causes us to be also a very small population. Sault Ste. Marie Band has decided they aren't going to use that. They use a lineal descendancy. If you descend from somebody who's Native American, you're Native American. That's why they have 23,000 members to our approximately 2,900 or maybe 3,300, something like that. Culturally, we have a lot of spirits, which I would say are more like angels than just, and the Ottawa portion actually believes that everything on the earth has a piece of the Creator in it as a spirit, so it all has to be respected. So if you go to pick a plant, you have to give a thanks and an offering. You harvest an animal, you thank the animal, you thank the Creator, you thank the earth. Everything has to be respected in that sense. And the Creator created everything with a song, with a rattle and a song, rather than other methods. Our creation story includes a person who said Nana Buju, from which we take Buju, and he said he could recreate part of the song. So during the Great Flood, he recreated that part to put this world on top of what was already there. But Turtle had to hold it up because the dirt he had to help recreate the world with wouldn't float without Turtle holding it up. So we say everything is on the back of Turtle. So like Turtle Clan handles our environmental and our earth and that type of related stuff. Our clan system is extensive now. It was pretty extensive then, but it helps separate what kind of tasks we in that Crane clan, Loon clan tended to be more oriented towards leadership training. And leadership is not okay, as a chief, I'm telling you this is what you're going to do. If they do want to do it, they just say, well, you stay here and be chief. We're going to move over there. You had to convince people. The story I use on how to be a smart or a good Ogama or a good leader is to say, since we used to summer in the south and winter up here, where we could trap, there'd be a period of time when you had to move villages. Well, the Ogama comes out, say, in early March and says, or Ogama Kwe comes out and says, it means a woman, because Kwe means it's a woman. In our language, if you're a teacher, you say Kino Mage, the teachings. Kino Mage Nini is a person who teaches, a guy. And if it's a woman, and it's Kino Mage Nini Kwe, a guy who teaches the teachings who is a woman. Because that's how our language is structured. When we use pronouns, you have to kind of hope you catch enough of the story, because our pronouns don't have any gender in them. We don't say he or she, we just say other person, basically. So you could be saying something and a person thinks, I wonder who that is, I wonder what he did. And it might not be he they're talking about. But it doesn't change the sense. So, anywho, you go back in that period and you find that that's why our language is so hard to learn too, by the way. We have animate and inanimate stuff, and it just gets, you should quit asking, why is that animate and that's not? Because it is, that's all they tell you. Oh, suddenly I lost where exactly I was, what I was.
When I went to the museum in Mount Pleasant some years ago, and the museum out here, there was a lot of similarity in some of the stories, like you were talking about the turtle, to the Bible story of creation. Well, I should talk about that.
Yeah, our creation story, basically, and I'll make sure none of the other elders are sitting here, because they'll holler at me because there's no snow on the ground and we're not in the winter. But our creation story basically is that our Creator, Giji Manadu, the greatest spirit, the biggest spirit, the whatever, wanted other beings around. So he fashioned 7 beings out of his own existence, 7 grandfathers, and they helped him as he sang his song, Shaking His Rattle, to create everything there is. And the order in which it was all created is sort of the same, but he put himself in each and every item. The earth, the water, the first plant, which we call wing gush or sweetgrass, which we also call grandmother's hair, which is why we braid it when we explore. Because your grandmother, you don't want her hair to be sticking out everywhere, you want to take care of it. The animals, the plants, the people that showed up needed someone to teach them how to live, so we learned from the animals. Mahangun, the wolf, which means walks beside. And it's named that because Nana Buju, who was kind of a spirit human, came down and taught people how to live, both through wise and serious teachings and through being kind of a clown at times. You learn how to do things because you see how it happened at Nana Buju, so you don't do that. But Nana Buju was there for the flood, and the flood came about because the underwater beings, their chief, wanted to be Nana Buju's best friend, but he had his best friend, a giant black wolf. Mahangun means walks beside. Because wherever we live, the wolves live next to us. The wolves taught us how to hunt. The traditional hunt for deer, elk, or whatever is just like a pack of wolves hunting it, which means you collect the ones that stay behind or are weaker, and you let the others go. Our house is the longhouse and the wigwam, roundhouse, wigwam, bark house, were based on what animals used to live. A longhouse is constructed similar to a bird nest, only upside down. The round lodge is built like a beaver house because that way you're not out in the weather and out in the cold. Our story is all on how you have to respect those things through the creation story, which is actually how we start telling history. It'd be like if you went to go to world history, and the first thing the instructor did, depending on your faith, would be to say, in the beginning, there was the void in God. And you'd think, oh no, that's a lot of history we're going to go through here. But that's kind of what happens. In the past, the elders in the wintertime would tell a creation story, which can take 4 days. And then the rest of the tribal history, because you're inside in the lodge, in the winter lodge, not a whole lot going on. Somebody once asked me at a different lecture, how'd you guys celebrate Christmas? I said, went like this. Yep, still snowing. What do we know from Christmas? I mean, if you believe the Mormons, then we knew about it. But if you don't believe the Mormons, in our stories, we don't have any of that. So, we didn't celebrate Christmas like that. We did celebrate midwinter. Everybody put their snowshoes on and go out and dance around and play games, snow snakes and things like that. We had a spring ceremony.
The winter, was that the winter solstice?
You got me. All I can tell you is we had 13 28-day months. That's 364 days in 1 year. So we were off by a little bit according to astronomy.
Yeah.
But that's how we kept track. And winter was when snow started, and sometimes it was over here, and sometimes it was over there. And so many months into that would be when you would do stuff. So it would be midwinter, just like how we told time. Morning, noon, night. So if you ask somebody what time you're showing up, and they said, noonday, they would say, and you'd say, what's that mean? That means daytime. They would say wabong, that would mean in the morning. Now the morning could be when the sun first comes up to maybe about here. Then from here over to here was midday. And from there down, it could be evening and night, which is all the same kind of word. Wabong meant tomorrow. So, it's not like we had a clock. That's why I said, tribal time was, okay, we're going to do it midday tomorrow. So people just showed up when the sun was more or less in the top of the sky, and the day after the one you talked to. They could show up a little early, they could show up a little late. Didn't matter. When we introduce ourselves, we also give our father's names, our mother's names, sometimes our grandfather's name, which I know, and my great-grandfather's name. My grandfather's Musqueam, Red Clouds, always colored red. His father was Benice, Golden Eagle. His father was Pakotush, or Pakatosh, or Pakwatosh, the headman of Fort Village and signer of several documents, including a couple treaties. But the reason we did that was we don't have last names. In our language and in our tradition, you just have your name. Kuwaikishkum. Village here, Kuwaikishkum. Village in Grand River, Kuwait. Federal documents, they wrote Pakatosh, Sam, as opposed to the Samuel Pakatosh in Mount Pleasant. His son, Benice, when he was born, they said, no, you have to you need another name too. You need a name like we got. Not knowing anything about names, they asked, well, what would be a good one? They said William. William's always a good name. So he became William McIntosh. Sam. His son was born Red Cloud, Cloud's red. And they said, well, we're going to name him George. Because they heard about some king in England called George and nobody liked him. They thought that'd be a good name. So he became George Sam McIntosh in parentheses. His son, my father, was born, and George asked how to spell Johnny, said Jonnie, because he knew a Bonnie, he knew a Connie, he knew a Ronnie, and a Donnie. So he just assumed Onnie with the letter in front, Johnny. Johnny, J, Sam, and they just dropped that last part altogether. So in 4 generations, we went from McIntosh, sometimes called Sam, to Sam, never called McIntosh, which is okay with us because we didn't have family names either. That was the whole point. Oh, by the way, his middle name became Jack because somebody asked him what it meant. And the story is that when they asked people what the J meant in my father's name, they were told Jack something. Jack crap or some word like that. When I was born, they had Johnny J, supposed to be the letter J. When they got the birth certificate, it had J-A-Y. So because he was Johnny and I was Johnny, I became J. In a traditional manner, I'd be Johnny the younger, to his Johnny the older, to my son, Johnny the younger, to me, Johnny the middle, to him, Johnny the older. But in the end, more people called him Shabbat, but they still called me Jay, and they called my son Johnny. So much so that it says Jay on my work ID. And some of the people that worked there didn't know I had a first name other than Jay. They're caught off guard. Who's this Johnny Sam guy? Well, that's me. So we actually got our name, the last part of it, through the federal bureaucracy. At least it's short. And other tribes have problems sometimes with that kind of stuff. When we first got reaffirmed, I answered the phone and we had a script. I even had it on a little card so I could remember to not do something silly. And the script was, hello, Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. This is your name speaking. So, and how can I help you today? So the phone rings, I answer it, give them the exact spiel. Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, this is Jay speaking, how can I help you? And the person on the other end of the phone said, Mr. Jay speaking, I'm Mary, her horses are fast. And I thought, ooh, there could be a catch in what's going on here, because they thought Jay speaking was my name. Because, of course, out west, they still have their horses run fast, or the lodge was gray, or whatever it is they use for their names. That's their family name. Because they were contacted later, about 30 years later than we were. You got any questions about anything? Yes, we do have a powwow. No, we didn't have one this year. Our powwow is based basically on every other powwow. We use the word dintamuk, which means to dance in a particular pose or a particular manner. As opposed to when they have a round dance. We have people with traditional ceremonial life, not so traditional everywhere else. I happen to be one of those. Otherwise, I'd be walking around or using a canoe. And I just decided that's not going to work. But I do ceremonies for people on occasion.
Is your mother June?
Yeah.
Okay, then your Alex and Rose was your grandparents?
No. He's my uncle. Yeah. Alex Andrew Sam, which my father really didn't like. Because, the name is Sam. I don't know, unless there's more than one of him, why he's got an S on him.
Yeah, we used to know
Wellston, yeah, he ran the Chittenden Nursery.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my cousins who were older than me and my father all worked in the Chittenden Nursery. And they said that it was interesting because Alex was a person who would, like, if you spun the tires in the gravel driveway a little bit, you had to come back and make the driveway smooth again because you can't be doing that. He also told us the story of when he started about the time he started working. He started working at Rock Forge. And they had a light gray jumpsuit. 3 days. And they suddenly realized they hadn't given him a new one. So they came to talk to him and asked him if he needed a new one the first 10 days that he was going to work there. I found out that his wasn't even dirty. And somebody said, well, how do you keep from getting your clothes dirty? He said, you just keep walking. If you don't stop walking around, or you pick stuff out in the yard when somebody sees you, you don't have to be in the shop where all the dust is flying around and it's all grungy. They asked him if he thought this was a good place for him to work. He said, no, I went to work for the Forest Service. Which it wasn't a better place for him to work. Now, most of the pine forests the Forest Service planted were grown at Chittenden Nursery. They used to collect pine cones, heat them up so the seeds would germinate and pop out, collect the seeds, plant seedlings out in the fields that were out there. When they got, yeah, I worked for the Forest Service for a while and planted pine trees over by irons. And the guy driving the little Caterpillar hit a stump, bounced me up off the roof. My helmet went down inside the planter and got squished. I
Hate
was
it when
pushing
that
a little
happens.
buzzer saying, could you stop, please? Because this ain't working out. And when I left, I took the pole out they had. It wasn't with the spoon and the tree going down the bush, like my dad did. It was the actual toe behind thing. So one of the things I did was I took a 3x5 card, laminated a little sign, and put it in there. It said green side up. Just so people could remember when you pull the pine tree out, don't turn it over and stick it down. It was there for quite a while. Then somebody suddenly went, I don't know who put this in here, but it's gotta go. Now we were here, one of the comments made by the guy that wrote our history book in the library, give a presentation in the library, was he asked, how come the high school's named the Chippewas? Since it was the Ottawas who were here. And everybody was like, the Ottawas? We didn't know. And I told them, that's okay, because I've seen their record, we don't. That's the other thing about Native Americans is we tend to give each other a hard time. Everything has some form of humor in it. Almost everything has humor about. Everything can have humor in it. I don't remember a funeral that was really sad in my family. Because you got together and you told stories about what the person was like. Tried not to use their names so they could get over to the other side without getting confused. But you told the funniest stories, the ones you wanted to remember the most. And that's kind of what happened. That's why everybody used to wonder what was going on, because we'd be inside the funeral home and laughing and joking, and sometimes doing other things like that. I said, that's because we saw the word funeral and the first letters are fun. What do you want us to do? Besides, we understood that we're going to be sad later, but we're sad because we're going to miss the person. We shouldn't be sad because the person is going someplace else, moving on to a better place probably. We should be happy for the person and sad for us, and we should be sad for us, not making everybody else sad. So we generally, everything can have a modicum of humor. The Hinsdale Atlas has a map of all the villages that Hinsdale found. Hinsdale was an anthropology, archaeology guy at the University of Michigan. And in his atlas, in all those villages, he has the language down for which village is what. Wyandotte, Huron, Potawatomi, Ottawa, Chippewa. He's got one though that it just says no language. So when I used it as a lecture on an overhead or something, I put that up there and I have the Ottawa are orange and the Chippewas are a nice green and the Potawatomis are blue and the Wyandottes are kind of maroon colored because it's got more wine. I don't know. But this one is just bright pink. And I blow it up and I show people and I say, it says no language. And I have no idea how to pronounce it because I don't know what language it is. But he has it on the map and it's spelled Shitumorons. Now I said if I was trying to be more French, I would say Shitumorons. If I was British, I'd be saying something that they probably shouldn't say in school too often. But I do have an idea how that got there. People ask my father's questions, and when he knows the answer and he wants to have some fun, he'll tell them the truth. But he'll tell them in a way that he knows is going to lead to something funny later on. He may not be able to see it be funny, but it would be funny. At least to him. When he filled out his W-2 form as he started with the County Road Commission, he told people they had to go in because if you read the Constitution, it says Indians not taxed. So he had to go in and fill out his thing saying he doesn't pay any taxes. He made the news advocate. How come Indians don't pay taxes? What's going on? He thought that was hilarious. Because we pay taxes. I don't know who the Indians not taxed are, but it ain't us. In that same vein, when they put in the oaths, I worked for the Chamber of Commerce. They thought it was funny because they made me the chief of staff.
Now that's funny.
See? It would even be more funny, except I was also the chief of the tribe at the time. But anyway, DOC's in there, Department of Corrections. They're having trouble naming the place. East Lake doesn't want to be the East Lake prison. Manistee County and the city of Manistee have said you can't use the word Manistee. They don't know what else to call it. One of their guys from Lansing somewhere sees me sitting in the Chamber of Commerce where they're meeting. He says, hey, are you Native American? I said, yeah, I'm Ottawa. Why? What's that got to do with anything necessarily? What's your question? He says, how do Native Americans say prison? So I'll have to think about that a second. Which you would have to think about because we didn't have any. People made restitution or people were banished. Nobody was ever locked up. So I sat there trying to think about it. I finally told them, that's profession. That's how we would do it. And they're all like, yeah, kind of interesting. How do you spell that? I said Reservation. Reservation. And the guy wrote it down. One of the people from the EDC that worked there, Tom Kabanik, looked over his shoulder, he goes, looks at me and he goes, reservation? And the guy's looking at it, he goes, it does say reservation. And they all spun and looked at me and they go, what do you mean? I said, well, it depends on which side of the line you're living on. And part of that's because in Minnesota, even today, although they don't follow that law, a Minnesota Native American who's not on their reservation may be shot because they are obviously causing trouble. That's where the term off the reservation comes from. So when I'm watching TV and these guys are going crazy, these guys are being all out of control, these guys are bad, they're off the reservation, I'm thinking, what? You're saying you can't use racist terms and you're throwing off the reservation in there? At least they said go rogue. The previous group that said they were going to go rogue actually said they were going renegade, which, okay. We get that up, we still get that stuff. Areas that are not good for the United States Army isn't called enemy territory, that's Indian country. Imagine standing there and having the guy go, oh, this is Indian country. I went, yeah! They didn't understand. When you join the Army and you sign the loyalty oath, if you're an officer, you have to sign an oath. The oath, it says, the questionnaire actually says, have you or anyone in your family ever advocated for the violent overthrow of the United States? Yes. It's the truth. Somebody in my family somewhere tried to throw the United States people out. So then they talked it over. Other people had done that. And they said, well, what we'll do is we'll let you put down as an ancestor, as I am Native American, an ancestor who fought the United States. Especially for the guys out west who fought more closer to where we were at the time. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't know what the problem is. Right? Do you have any specific questions, anything you want to know about?
When you traded furs for stuff to Sears, how did you take it? Horseback, a canoe,
They
train?
probably took a canoe to come to the mail place, the post office, and mailed them by whatever the postal service was. Because traveling by canoe was the mainstay for travel, because horses didn't work so well in the forest until they started logging. Then they had horses, carriages and things. Indian Village had a trail that went into it, so there was a old Model T by a guy in Rutherford who used to drive out that way and pick stuff up for him and haul it into town, pick them up, haul them.
When we lived in Owasso, they had a canoe at the museum that was, would 17 foot be, or would be like 30 foot?
Yeah, the trade canoe, the
Huge
Chichima,
thing.
was 35 feet long usually, and about 8 feet wide.
Yeah, there you go.
It would haul about 6 tons worth of stuff.
Yeah.
And they used a single mast step-up sail. And
I know they tried to teach us a song. You would probably know what it is. It's a French song that had a rhythm, and then they would go faster and faster and faster.
Yeah,
And they said, yeah, they'd do that for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, the Ottawa or the Anishinaabe who traded would sail straight across the lake. They wouldn't go up the coast and around. They wouldn't go down and around.
Right to Milwaukee or something?